A couple, celebrating their anniversary, went on a hunting trip into the Michigan wilderness. They never came back. 2 years later, their dog suddenly appeared on the front porch, emaciated, injured, and carrying a secret that would expose a horrifying truth. At 72, Elizabeth Spence found the garden work got harder each year, but she refused to let the weeds win. Wincing as she pushed herself up from her knees, her arthritic joints protested the movement. "Just a few more," she muttered, before the insistent beep of the timer reminded her of the pot roast in the kitchen. She leveraged herself to her feet, one hand pressed against her lower back, each step up the wooden stairs a painful twinge. She'd put off the gardening for weeks, but with her son Neil at work and Dean, she stopped that thought cold. It had been 2 years since Dean and his wife Joseline vanished on their hunting trip. As she reached for the screen door handle, a movement on the porch caught her eye. She expected a raccoon or stray cat, but the trowel clattered from her nerveless fingers. Lying on the worn wooden boards was a dog. Not just any dog. Even through the matted, filthy fur and shocking thinness, she recognized him instantly. Rufus, Dean's Irish Wolfhound. Elizabeth stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest as her heart began a wild, painful rhythm. "No," she whispered, blinking hard. "It can't be." The dog lifted his head weakly at the sound of her voice. One of his front legs was wrapped in a makeshift, stained bandage. His ribs showed starkly through his coat, and there was a raw, infected wound on his forehead. But his gentle brown eyes, those eyes that had always looked at Dean with such devotion, were unmistakably Rufus's. "Oh my God," Elizabeth gasped, gripping the porch railing. The dog had been missing for 2 years along with Dean and Joseline. Search parties had found nothing. No bodies, no gear, no trace of them or Rufus. With shaking hands, she fumbled for her phone, nearly dropping it twice before dialing 911. "This is Elizabeth Spence," she managed, her voice a whisper. "I need officers at my house. The dog, my son's dog, just showed up. My son who's been missing for 2 years. "Ma'am, can you repeat that?" the dispatcher asked. "My son is DEA agent Dean Spence," she said, her voice firmer now. "He went missing 2 years ago with his wife, Joseline, while hunting. Their dog just appeared on my porch. He's injured badly. Please send someone now." Units were on their way. Elizabeth sank onto the porch steps, keeping her eyes on Rufus. The dog's tail gave a weak thump against the boards. She wanted to comfort him, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. All she could do was stare and whisper, "Where's Dean, boy? Where's my son?" The wail of sirens grew louder. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled into the driveway. Officers Morrison and Bradley. She recognized them both from the initial search. "Mrs. Spence," Officer Morrison said gently, his eyes widening when he saw the dog. "Jesus, is that really?" "It's Rufus," Elizabeth confirmed, tears streaming down her face. Officer Bradley was already on his radio, calling for additional units and a veterinarian. Morrison knelt beside the dog. "Hey there, boy. You've had a rough time, haven't you?" He looked up at Elizabeth. "We need to get him medical attention immediately, and we'll need to take you to the station. Detectives will want to speak with you right away. But what about searching? If Rufus is alive, maybe Dean." "We'll handle everything," Morrison assured her. "Let's focus on getting you and the dog somewhere safe first." More vehicles arrived, an animal control van with a veterinarian, 2 more patrol cars, and an unmarked detective's vehicle. Elizabeth watched in a daze as the vet, a young woman with gentle hands, carefully examined Rufus. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration," the vet murmured. "This wound on his head is infected. The leg, someone tried to bandage this, but it's been a while. We need to get him to the clinic immediately." They loaded Rufus onto a special stretcher. Elizabeth found herself in the back of Officer Morrison's patrol car, heading to the station. Her mind raced with questions. How had Rufus survived 2 years? Who had bandaged his leg? What happened to Dean and Joseline? The familiar police station felt surreal. Officers guided her to a comfortable interview room. "Mrs. Spence, I'm Detective Walsh." A woman in her 40s introduced herself. "I know this must be overwhelming. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Where's the dog?" Elizabeth asked. "Dr. Hernandez is with him now. She'll update us as soon as she can. Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what happened." The small room grew crowded with concerned faces as more detectives and uniformed officers filed in. Elizabeth recounted finding Rufus, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. "The bandage on his leg," Detective Walsh said thoughtfully. "That's not something a dog could do himself. Someone helped him. Then someone saw him," Elizabeth said urgently. Someone knows something. We're already mobilizing search teams, another detective assured her. We'll start from your property and work outward. Follow any trail the dog might have left. Dr. Hernandez arrived then. He's stable, she announced. Elizabeth sagged with relief. Sedated for now while we treat his wounds. He's been through hell, but he's a fighter. Someone definitely provided medical care at some point, though not recently. That bandage is at least a few weeks old. When can I see him? Elizabeth asked. Let's give him a few hours to rest. I'll bring him to you as soon as he's ready. The vet paused. Mrs. Spence, that's one tough dog. Whatever happened out there, he fought to make it back. Elizabeth nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Rufus had made it back, but where was her son? The interview room was warm with so many bodies packed inside. Mrs. Spence, think carefully. Detective Walsh pressed gently. In the days before Dean and Joseline went hunting, did he mention anything unusual? Any concerns about his work, threats he'd received? Elizabeth shook her head. Nothing. He was excited about the trip. They'd been planning it for months. He said the woods up north were perfect for deer. The door opened and 3 more officers entered, including Lieutenant Marcus Hayes from the DEA. Elizabeth, Hayes said, his face grave. I'm sorry you're going through this. We're going to do everything we can to find answers. He turned to the others. I've got our tech team pulling all of Dean's case files from the 2 months before he disappeared. If someone targeted him, there might be a connection. Another officer, younger, with sharp blue eyes, stepped forward. Mrs. Spence, I'm Officer Dmitry Volov. I worked a few joint operations with Dean. He's a good man. The conversation continued, theories flying back and forth. Elizabeth's head began to pound. She'd been at the station for over 3 hours, and the adrenaline was wearing off. Her arthritis was flaring badly. I think Mrs. Spence has had enough for now, Officer Volov said suddenly. Perhaps someone should take her home. She needs rest. Detective Walsh nodded. Is there someone we can call to stay with you? My other son, Neil, but he's at work in Detroit. It'll take him a few hours to get here. I can drive you home, Officer Volov offered. Make sure you're settled safely. Elizabeth gratefully accepted. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Hernandez called with an update. Rufus is stable but still sedated. I'd like to bring him to your home this evening. I'd like to check his response when he wakes up in familiar surroundings. Yes, please, Elizabeth said immediately. The drive back felt surreal. Officer Volov kept up a gentle stream of conversation, asking about her garden, her years in the community. The search teams will be working through the night, he assured her as they walked to her door. Inside, Elizabeth sank into her favorite armchair. Would you like me to wait until your son arrives? He offered. No, you've been very kind. I'll be fine. She paused. Officer Volov, do you really think, could Dean still be alive? Something flickered across his face. Concern? Sympathy? It was gone before she could identify it. If anyone could survive out there, it would be Dean. He knew those woods better than most. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted them. It was Neil's pickup. He burst through the door and immediately wrapped his mother in a careful hug. Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. Traffic was a nightmare. He noticed Officer Volov and stopped. Sorry, I'm Neil Spence. Officer Dmitry Volov. I was just making sure your mother got home safely. Is it true? Rufus really came back? Neil asked. He's at the vet clinic, Elizabeth explained. Dr. Hernandez will bring him home soon. He's in bad shape, but alive. Jesus, 2 years. Neil ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father. How is that even possible? That's what we're trying to determine, Officer Volov said. I should get back to the station. I'll check in tomorrow. Volov was just stepping off the porch when a van with emergency veterinary services on the side turned into the driveway. Dr. Hernandez was behind the wheel. Perfect timing, the vet called out. He's starting to wake up. I'll need help getting him inside. Officer Volov immediately turned back. I'll help. They opened the van's rear doors to reveal Rufus on a special cushioned stretcher. The dog's eyes were open but glazed from sedation. His head lifted slightly at the sound of voices. Easy boy, Dr. Hernandez soothed. Let's get you. The transformation was instantaneous. The moment Rufus's gaze landed on Officer Volov, the dog exploded into motion. Despite his weakened state, he lunged upward, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. His lips pulled back, showing teeth, and he barked with a ferocity that made everyone step back. Whoa! Neil exclaimed, moving protectively in front of his mother. Rufus continued to snarl, his entire focus on Officer Volov, who had taken several steps backward, hands raised. "It's okay," Volov said, though Elizabeth noticed he'd gone pale. "I probably smell like my K9 unit. Dogs can be territorial about that." But Rufus wasn't backing down. He continued to growl, hackles raised, eyes never leaving the officer. "Maybe you should go," Neil suggested. "We can handle it from here." Volov nodded. "Yeah, probably best. I'll check in tomorrow." Only after the patrol car had pulled away did Rufus begin to calm, though he kept looking toward the road. "That was strange," Dr. Hernandez mused. "In my experience, dogs don't usually react that strongly to just a scent, especially not in his condition." "Well, let's get him inside." As they carefully carried Rufus into the house, Elizabeth couldn't shake the image of the dog's reaction. She had never seen him act that aggressive toward anyone. Dr. Hernandez left an hour ago, satisfied that Rufus was stable enough. The dog now lay on his old bed in the corner of the living room, his breathing steady but labored. Neil sat across from his mother at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them. The air was heavy with unspoken fears, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of coffee that hung in the kitchen. Neil and Elizabeth sat at the same table where their family had shared countless meals, a silent tension now filling the space. Neil broke the silence, his voice quiet. "He loved that dog more than anything," he said, watching Rufus sleep. "Remember when he first brought him home?" Joseline was furious, yelling, "You didn't tell me he'd be the size of a small horse." Elizabeth managed a faint smile, recalling how quickly her daughter-in-law had fallen in love with the dog, sneaking him treats when she thought Dean wasn't looking. "Dean always knew," Neil added. "He'd pretend not to see." The conversation lulled, and a new silence settled in. Elizabeth absently rubbed her knuckles, her arthritis flaring up, making her joints feel like they were filled with ground glass. "Mom, your reaction to the officer earlier was odd," Neil said, breaking the quiet. "Dean always said Rufus could read people better than anyone." Elizabeth nodded, remembering the time with the shady contractor. Rufus had refused to let the man inside, and Dean's instincts proved right. The man was later caught scamming elderly homeowners. The sudden ring of the phone made them both jump, each call now carrying the weight of a possible answer. Elizabeth's heart pounded as she answered with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Spence, this is Detective Walsh. I wanted to give you an update on our search efforts." She put the call on speaker for Neil. "We've had teams in the forest all afternoon. We believe we've located Rufus's tracks leading toward more populated areas. Our K9 units followed the trail for several miles." Neil leaned forward, hope in his eyes. Walsh's voice was carefully neutral. "The trail is old, Mrs. Spence. Days, maybe weeks. It's a meandering pattern, what you'd expect from an animal foraging and surviving on its own. We lost the trail at several stream crossings. But someone bandaged his leg," Elizabeth insisted. "Someone helped him." "Yes, that's unusual," Walsh conceded. "We're considering that a hunter or hiker may have provided basic first aid. But honestly, the bandage is crude. It could have been there for quite some time. It's not uncommon for people in the wilderness to help an injured animal without reporting it." "What are you saying?" Neil's voice had a sharp edge. Walsh sighed audibly. "Based on the dog's condition, the meandering trail, and the time frame, our working theory is that Rufus has been surviving in the wilderness for the past 2 years. Dogs are remarkably adaptable, especially a hardy breed like an Irish Wolfhound. He would have been able to hunt small game and find water sources." "You think my son is dead?" Elizabeth's words were flat, not a question. "Mrs. Spence, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but 2 years in those woods with no confirmed sightings, no evidence of camps or shelters beyond our initial searches. The most likely scenario is that Dean and Joseline had an accident, a fall perhaps, or a wildlife encounter. The dog survived because he's built for it in ways humans aren't." "That's crap," Neil snapped. "My brother was DEA. He was trained for survival. He knew those woods like the back of his hand. I understand your frustration, Mr. Spence. No, you don't. You're writing them off based on a few hours of searching and some dog tracks. We're not writing anyone off. The search will continue for days, maybe weeks. We'll search every cave, every ravine. But I wanted to be honest about what we're finding." Elizabeth closed her eyes. "Thank you for the update, Detective." After she hung up, Neil slammed his fist on the table. "They're giving up, just like they did 2 years ago. They searched for months back then," Elizabeth reminded him gently. "Not good enough. Dean wouldn't just die out there. If something happened, there would be evidence. Bodies don't just disappear. Animals. Elizabeth couldn't finish the thought. No, Neil stood abruptly. I don't accept that. Look at Rufus. He made it back. He found his way home after 2 years. That dog wouldn't leave Dean unless. He paused, his anger deflating slightly. Unless he had no choice. They both looked at the sleeping dog, whose face bore the scars of his ordeal. A missing chunk from one ear, the terrible wound on his head still raw. What happened out there, boy? Elizabeth whispered. Where's my son? Rufus's eyes fluttered open, his tail giving a single weak thump before he drifted back to sleep. The bandage means someone helped him, Neil said firmly. Someone knows something. The police just need to look harder. Accidents happen, Neil. Even to experienced people. Remember that park ranger last year who... Don't. Neil spun to face her. Don't compare Dean to some random hiker. He knew those woods better than anyone. He'd never, ever put Joseline in danger. I know that. Do you? Because you're sitting here listening to that detective's theories like they mean something. Like Dean and Joseline just what? Fell off a cliff. Got eaten by bears with no trace. Elizabeth flinched at the harsh images. The search teams gave up after 3 months, just like they're giving up now. Neil ran his hands through his hair in frustration. They see Rufus and think, oh, the dog survived. The humans must be dead. But what about the bandage, Mom? What about the fact that Rufus made it home at all? He wouldn't leave Dean unless something forced him to. Or unless Dean told him to, Elizabeth said quietly. Neil stopped pacing. You think Dean sent him for help? I don't know what to think anymore. Elizabeth's shoulders sagged. I want to believe they're alive, but 2 years. No ransom demands, no bodies, no camps. Maybe the police are right. No, Neil's jaw set, a painful reminder of his father. I'm not accepting that without proof. He walked toward the garage, and Elizabeth heard the clanking of metal. He returned carrying his hunting rifle and Dean's old camping pack. What I should have done 2 years ago. I'm going back out there. Neil, it's getting dark. I have lights and gear. I searched for weeks after they disappeared, but maybe I missed something. If Rufus found his way back now, after all this time, something made that happen. The police are going through the motions. They've already decided Dean and Joseline are dead. I haven't. Elizabeth stood, her arthritic knees protesting. At least wait until morning. Go with the search teams. So they can tell me where I can and can't look. No thanks. He checked Dean's old GPS unit. I'll start where they went missing and work outward. Different patterns than last time. If someone helped Rufus, there might be cabins or camps we missed. Neil, please. I can't lose you too. He paused, seeing the fear in his mother's eyes. His expression softened. You won't. I'll check in by satellite phone every 12 hours. But I have to do this, Mom. I can't just sit here while they write Dean off. Elizabeth saw that determined look and knew there was no talking him out of it. Be careful, she whispered. I will. He hugged her briefly. Take care of Rufus. Maybe when he's stronger, he'll be able to show us something. The police said the trail went cold. The police followed one trail. Rufus might have taken different routes over 2 years. There could be other signs. He shouldered the pack and headed for the door, rifle in hand. I'll find something, Mom. Whatever happened out there, I'll find the truth. Elizabeth watched from the doorway as Neil loaded his truck. She wanted to stop him, to keep her remaining son safe, but she understood his need to act. The not knowing was its own kind of torture. As the truck's taillights disappeared into the darkness, Elizabeth closed the door and returned to Rufus's side. The dog's eyes were open now, watching her with an ancient sadness. He's going to look for them, she told the dog unnecessarily. Just like you did, I suppose. Rufus whimpered softly, his gaze moving to the door as if he, too, was watching Neil leave. Elizabeth settled into her chair, one hand resting on the dog's head. Whatever secrets those woods held, she prayed they would finally give them up. The house felt too quiet with Neil gone. Elizabeth sat in her armchair beside Rufus's bed, the only sounds the ticking of the grandfather clock and the dog's labored breathing. Do you remember all those Sunday dinners? She whispered to him. You under the table hoping for scraps. Joseline always snuck you pieces of roast. Her voice caught. I miss them so much. I keep wondering, will I ever see my boy again? Will he walk through that door like you did? She knew she was being sentimental, talking to a dog about her fears, but who else was there? Neil was out in the dark woods, chasing shadows and hope. Her arthritis was too bad to call her sister. Holding the phone that long would be agony. So she sat with Rufus, 2 survivors keeping vigil together. The police think you lived wild, she whispered. that Dean and Joseline had an accident. But you wouldn't leave him, would you? Not unless you had to. Not unless he told you to go. A sharp knock at the door shattered the quiet. Elizabeth's heart leaped. Neil must have changed his mind. She pushed herself up, her joints protesting, and shuffled to the front door. Through the peephole, she was surprised to see Officer Volkov, his uniform crisp. He held a manila folder. "Officer Volkov, it's quite late." "I apologize, Mrs. Spence," he said, looking genuinely contrite. "I've been going through old case files at the station, cross-referencing some of Dean's DEA work with missing persons reports. I think I might have found a lead. I was going to wait until morning, but I saw your lights were on and thought you'd want to know immediately." "Of course. Come in." The moment she started to open the door wider, Rufus erupted into a frenzy of barking. Despite his weakened state, he struggled to his feet, lips pulled back in a snarl, his focus laser-sharp on the officer. "Rufus! Stop that!" Elizabeth turned, shocked by the intensity of his reaction. He continued his aggressive display, trying to lunge forward despite his injuries. His barking was so loud it hurt her ears. "I'm so sorry," she said to Volkov, who had taken a step back. "I don't know what's gotten into him." "It's all right," Volkov said, though she noticed he kept his hand near his service weapon. "Trauma can change an animal's behavior. Let me put him in his crate." "Just a moment." It took considerable effort to get Rufus into the wire crate. He fought her the whole way, something he'd never done before, and continued barking even after she'd latched the door. "Hush now. That's enough. Officer Volkov is trying to help us." She returned to the front door, embarrassed and flustered. "I'm so sorry. Please come in. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be wonderful, thank you." Volkov stepped inside, his eyes immediately scanning the living room. It must be difficult being here alone. Neil was here earlier, but he's gone to search the woods himself. He couldn't wait for morning. "Family often feels that way," Volkov said, following her to the kitchen. "It's natural to want to take action." "Yes, I suppose so. Now, you said you found some connections in old files." "I did. Some very interesting patterns that might explain." Elizabeth had just turned to ask him to sit when she felt a soft cloth press against her face. The sharp chemical smell hit her nostrils a split second before she understood what was happening. Chloroform. She tried to struggle, but Volkov was younger, stronger, and had the element of surprise. One arm wrapped around her waist, holding her, while the other kept the cloth firmly in place. Her arthritic hands clawed weakly at his arm, but already the edges of her vision were going dark. "I'm sorry about this," she heard him say, his voice sounding very far away. "But your son made this necessary." Her legs gave out. The kitchen tilted sideways. Through the growing darkness, she could hear Rufus going absolutely wild in his crate, barking, snarling, and throwing himself against the wire. "He tried to warn me," she thought, the realization muzzily forming in her mind. He knew. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her completely was Rufus' desperate barking and the sound of her body hitting the floor. Consciousness returned slowly, bringing a pounding headache and the metallic taste of chemicals. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered open to harsh fluorescent lighting and cold concrete. She was sitting on the floor, her back against something hard, her hands bound behind her. "Ah, you're awake." Officer Volkov stood a few feet away, no longer the helpful, concerned officer from before. His uniform was gone, replaced by dark civilian clothes. The friendly mask had dropped, revealing cold calculation in his blue eyes. "Why?" Elizabeth's voice was a croak. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your son couldn't leave well enough alone," Volkov replied matter-of-factly. "He had to play hero. Had to send that damn dog for help." Elizabeth's mind struggled to process this. "You mean Dean is alive?" Volkov pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "For now. That may change depending on how cooperative everyone decides to be." Two large, rough-looking men entered through a metal door. They spoke rapidly to Volkov in Russian, their tone angry. Volkov responded in the same language, gesturing toward Elizabeth. One of the men spat on the floor and said something that sounded like a curse. "Get her up," Volkov said in English. "Time for a family reunion." The two men hauled Elizabeth to her feet, ignoring her gasp of pain as her joints protested. Her shoulders screamed as they half-dragged her through the warehouse. She tried to take in details: metal shelving, shipping containers, the smell of motor oil and rust. They were somewhere industrial, but she had no idea where. They passed through another door into a connected warehouse space. "How long have you had him?" Elizabeth managed. Volkov paused at the container door. 2 years, give or take. Your son has been very useful to our operations. DEA intelligence is quite valuable in certain circles. You forced him to give you information. Forced is such an ugly word. Let's just say we provided proper motivation. First his wife, then his dog. He was much more cooperative after we showed him what happens to those who resist. The implications hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. Joseline was dead. They'd tortured Dean for 2 years, using his loved ones against him. You're a police officer, she said, though it sounded foolish even to her. I'm a businessman, Volkov corrected. Being a police officer just provides excellent cover and access. Now, I have things to attend to. Try to get comfortable, Mrs. Spence. You'll be here for a while. Officer Volkov had his hand on the container door when he froze. The sound was unmistakable. Multiple vehicles approaching fast, tires crunching on gravel. His hand flew to the radio on his belt. He spoke rapidly in Russian, his voice tight with urgency. The response that crackled back was panicked, the voice on the other end shouting. Even without understanding the language, Elizabeth could hear the fear. Through the thin walls of the container, she heard car doors slamming, many of them. Then a voice she recognized. This is the police. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up. It was Detective Walsh on a megaphone. Volkov spun back to Elizabeth, his face twisted with rage. He pulled out his service weapon, a Glock that looked impossibly large and black in the dim light. Your son brought this on you, he snarled, rushing back to her. All of this is his fault. He grabbed the zip ties holding her to the pole, cutting them roughly with a knife. Elizabeth cried out as her arthritic wrists, held in one position too long, screamed in protest. But Volkov didn't care. He hauled her to her feet, spun her around, and pressed the gun to her temple. Move, he ordered, using her as a shield as he pushed her toward the container door. Outside the container, the warehouse had erupted into chaos. Elizabeth could hear the Russians shouting to each other, the scrape of crates being pushed into defensive positions. Someone was yelling orders in accented English. Volkov dragged her through the warehouse, keeping her body between him and the main entrance. Elizabeth's legs shook, her joints on fire, but the gun at her head kept her moving. This is your last warning. Detective Walsh's voice boomed through the megaphone. Release any hostages and surrender peacefully. The response was a burst of automatic weapons fire from somewhere near the main entrance. The warehouse erupted. Elizabeth heard glass shattering and bullets punching through the metal walls with sharp pinging sounds. SWAT is breaching, someone shouted. An explosion. A flashbang grenade. Elizabeth's ears rang. More gunfire. The sharp crack of police weapons mixing with the deeper chatter of automatic rifles. Volkov cursed and pushed her faster, trying to navigate through the maze of containers and shelving. They were passing under a wooden support beam when a stray bullet struck it, showering them both with splinters. Volkov instinctively ducked, his grip on Elizabeth loosening for just a moment. It was enough. Elizabeth wrenched herself sideways, her body protesting, but adrenaline giving her strength she didn't know she still had. She stumbled, fell, and rolled behind a forklift. Damn it! Volkov shouted. He looked between her and his escape route, made a split-second decision, and ran. Elizabeth lay gasping behind the forklift, splinters in her hair, her whole body shaking. The gunfire was intensifying. She could hear officers shouting, "Move, move, move," and contact left. Dean. She had to get to Dean. Fighting through the pain, she began crawling across the concrete floor. Her knees screamed. Her hands were bleeding from the rough surface, but she kept going. The plywood-walled cell wasn't far. She could see it through the chaos, that makeshift corner room where her son was chained. More gunfire erupted near what sounded like a back entrance. Someone was screaming in Russian. Glass crashed. A flashbang went off somewhere to her right. The concussion made her ears ring worse. She reached the corner, crawled around it. The padlock was still off from when they'd brought her to see Dean. She pushed the door open. Dean was there trying to sit up on his filthy mattress, chains clanking. His hollow eyes widened when he saw her. "Mom, get down," he whispered urgently. "Get behind something solid." Elizabeth crawled to him, staying low. More gunfire erupted closer now. She could hear the SWAT team's tactical commands. "Drop your weapons. Hands behind your back." The commands were in English now, directed at someone nearby. Russian voices yelled back defiantly. 3 quick gunshots, the controlled fire of trained police officers. Then 2 more. Someone started screaming in Russian, the sound full of pain and fear. Another shot cut it short. Then suddenly silence. The kind that rings in your ears after chaos. Elizabeth reached Dean, her arthritic joints burning from the crawl across concrete. He stretched his skeletal arms toward her as far as the chains would allow. I'm sorry, Mom. This is my fault. They took you because Shoo, Elizabeth said, taking his face in her hands, feeling the sharp bones under his papery skin. None of this is your fault. Footsteps approached fast. Multiple sets, tactical boots on concrete. Police, anyone in here? The voice was American, professional, but urgent. Here. Elizabeth called out, her voice cracking. We're here. We need help. Multiple officers rushed in, weapons drawn but pointed low. They swept the room professionally, checking corners. And then behind them, Mom! Niels pushed past the officers, his hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. Mom! Oh God! He stopped short when he saw Dean clearly for the first time, his brother, the strong DA agent who taught him to hunt, who'd always been larger than life, reduced to this skeletal figure, chained like an animal. Jesus Christ, Niels breathed. Dean, it's safe now, the lead SWAT officer said, already on his radio. Suspects are down or in custody. We need bolt cutters in here. Another officer was shouting. We need medics in here now. We have victims, one in critical condition. Niels dropped to his knees beside his brother, his face a mask of shock and rage. Dean managed a ghost of his old smile. Hey, little brother. You look good. Don't joke, man, Niels' voice cracked. Not now. Not after. He couldn't finish. Paramedics rushed in with their equipment and a stretcher. They went to work immediately checking Dean's vitals, and starting in 4. One of them produced bolt cutters and began working on the chains. As they freed him from the pole, Dean gripped Elizabeth's hand with what little strength he had, his eyes filled with tears. They killed Joseline, Mom. 14 months ago, his voice broke. She tried to escape, and they shot her. Made me watch. Said it was my fault for not cooperating fast enough. Elizabeth held his hand tighter, her own tears flowing freely. Niels made a sound like a wounded animal. We've got to move him, one of the paramedics said. He needs immediate medical attention. They carefully, so carefully, lifted Dean onto the stretcher. He weighed almost nothing. Elizabeth struggled to her feet, Niels immediately there to support her. Together, they followed the stretcher out of that hellish room. The warehouse was a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the walls. Spent shell casings littered the floor. SWAT officers were everywhere, some still clearing rooms, others standing guard over suspects. They emerged into the night air. When had it become night? How long had she been in that container? Elizabeth gasped at the scene. Police vehicles everywhere, their lights painting everything in reds and blues. Ambulances waiting. 3 Russians were on their knees, hands zip-tied behind their backs, officers standing guard. 2 bodies lay under white sheets, blood seeping through. And there, in the back of a patrol car, sat Officer Dmitry Volkov. His face was bloodied. He'd been tackled during his escape attempt, Elizabeth would later learn. He stared straight ahead, not meeting anyone's eyes. Ma'am, we need to check you out too, a paramedic said, approaching Elizabeth. But she couldn't look away from Dean as they loaded him into the ambulance. 2 years. Her son had been held in that warehouse for 2 years, just miles from home. The nightmares were over, but the healing had just begun. Elizabeth stood at the glass window of the ICU, her palm pressed against the cool surface. She still couldn't reconcile the skeletal figure in the hospital bed with her son. Dean had always been strong, solid, 6 feet of trained muscle and confidence. The thing lying in that bed looked like a concentration camp survivor. Mrs. Spence, Dr. Kumar approached, his expression grave. I wanted to update you on your son's condition. Niels joined them, his arm around his mother's shoulders. They'd both been checked and released. Elizabeth's injuries were minor, though her arthritis was flaring terribly from the stress and abuse. He's severely malnourished, Dr. Kumar began, consulting his tablet. His body weight is approximately 60% of what it should be. We're seeing signs of refeeding syndrome, so we have to be very careful with nutrition. Severe dehydration has damaged his kidneys. We're monitoring that closely. Will he? Elizabeth couldn't finish. Yes, but we're seeing infected wounds, particularly on his wrists and ankles from the chains. Muscle atrophy is severe. Even if he recovers, he'll need months of physical therapy to walk properly again. Elizabeth's joints screamed as she shifted position, but she ignored them. Her pain was nothing compared to what Dean had endured. There are some people here who need to speak with him, Dr. Kumar added reluctantly. FBI. They say it's urgent. Through the glass, Elizabeth watched two agents in dark suits enter Dean's room. They were gentle, professional, but she could see the urgency in their movements. Whatever Dean knew, it was important. She and Niels were allowed in to support him during the interview. Dean's voice was barely a whisper, and he had to rest frequently, but his mind was sharp. The details he revealed made Elizabeth's blood run cold. The warehouse was a hub, Dean rasped. Smuggling operation. Drugs, weapons, people. Sometimes. A route from Canada, using back roads and private property. They had border patrol on payroll. How many officers were involved? Agent Martinez asked, recording everything. Saw maybe 12 different ones over 2 years. Volkov was the main contact, but there were more. They talked about others. Dean closed his eyes, concentrating. Badge numbers. I memorized badge numbers when I could see them. He recited a series of numbers. Agent Martinez's partner was already on the phone, relaying the information. The operation? Martinez prompted gently. Cartel money. Mexican cartel partnered with Russian mob. Millions invested. They needed DEA intel. Patrol schedules, planned raids, which routes we were watching. Dean's skeletal hand clenched. I held out for 3 months. Then they brought Joseline to my cell. Said they'd hurt her if I didn't cooperate. Elizabeth squeezed his other hand, feeling the bones through his papery skin. I gave them outdated intel at first, stuff that wouldn't matter, but they figured it out. Tears leaked from Dean's sunken eyes. 14 months in, Joseline fought back. Grabbed a gun from one of them during feeding. Almost made it to the door. His voice broke. Niels made a sound of pure rage. They shot her in front of me. Said it was my fault. Said if I just cooperated. Dean couldn't continue for a moment. After that, they used Rufus. Every time I hesitated, every time I tried to give them false information, they'd hurt him. Burns, cuts, beatings. That wound on his head. That was from 2 weeks ago, when I tried to refuse again. But you got him out, Agent Martinez said. Took me months to work it free. The opening was too small for me, but Rufus could squeeze through. I knew he'd find his way home. He knows every trail between here and Mom's house. How did you convince them to bring the dog to you? Told them I was dying, that I'd give them everything. Safe house locations, undercover agent identities, but only if I could say goodbye to my dog first. They believed me because I looked dead already. A ghost of a smile. Volkov always underestimated how smart Rufus is. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Dean providing every detail he could remember. License plates, voices, names mentioned in passing. The FBI agents looked grimmer with each revelation. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a massive corruption case that reached into multiple law enforcement agencies. Finally, Dr. Kumar intervened. He needs to rest. As the agents left, one turned back. Mr. Spence, we've already arrested 8 officers based on the raid. Your information will help us get the rest. You've saved a lot of lives. Dean closed his eyes. Couldn't save the one that mattered most. A knock at the door interrupted the heavy silence. Dr. Hernandez, the veterinarian, stood there with a familiar figure. I got special permission, she said softly. Someone wanted to see his dad. Rufus limped into the room, his tail wagging despite his injuries. The dog, who'd been too weak to stand properly just hours ago, had found new strength. He approached the bed carefully, as if understanding how fragile Dean was. Hey boy, Dean whispered, his skeletal hand reaching out. Rufus gently rested his head on the bed, positioned so Dean could touch him without straining. The dog's eyes never left his master's face. Good boy, Dean breathed. Such a good boy. You did it. You got help. Both man and dog were crying. Dean's tears were silent. Rufus came out as soft whines. The dog carefully placed one paw on the bed, maintaining contact. Agent Martinez appeared in the doorway one more time. Mrs. Spence, I thought you should know. We've found remains at the warehouse. 3 bodies so far. Your son was right about the murders, and we expect more arrests within the hour. Elizabeth nodded, unable to speak. Justice was coming, but it couldn't bring back Joseline or undo 2 years of torture. As the room cleared, leaving just family, Niels moved closer to his brother's bed. Dad would be proud, he said quietly. You never gave up. You survived, and you got Rufus home. Dean's eyes found his brother. I gave them information. People might have died because of what I told them. You were tortured for 2 years, Niels said firmly. You watched your wife murdered. You did what you had to do to survive. No one could blame you for that. Elizabeth thought of Joseline, vibrant, laughing Joseline who loved hiking and bad action movies, and who looked at Dean like he hung the moon. gone because of greed and corruption. The tears came again, silent and painful. I memorized everything, Dean whispered, his energy fading. Every face, every name, every detail. For her. They're going to pay for what they did to her. Rest now, Elizabeth said, stroking his forehead around the IVs and monitors. Just rest. Dr. Kumar returned. He needs to sleep. You can stay, but please let him rest. The family settled in for their vigil. Niels in an uncomfortable chair. Elizabeth in a recliner a nurse had brought for her arthritic joints. Rufus curled on a blanket on the floor, positioned where he could see Dean, refusing to leave his post. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and Dean's breathing. Elizabeth settled back, prepared for the long vigil ahead. Her son was home, damaged, grieving, but home. They would face whatever came next together, the recovery, the trials, the long journey back from hell. For now, it was enough to sit in this sterile room and watch her son breathe. Each rise and fall of his chest, a small victory, a defiance of those who'd tried to break him. He'd survived. They'd survived.